The airlock cycled with a scream of tortured metal as three figures in bulky, primitive power suits launched themselves into the lethal silence of the vacuum. They didn't glide, they propelled themselves like jagged stones toward the Vorgan Raider's hull. Behind them, the star chime groaned, its ornamental spine snapping under the weight of the next kinetic volley. The abyss is hungry, and it doesn't care about your lineage or your legends. If you want to see how the monsters from the Deathworld rewrite the stars, you should subscribe and stay close. Now, let's see where the blood started to spill. 12 hours earlier, Commander Kalen had been polishing a resonance crystal in the meditation suite. The star chime was a masterpiece of Elunite engineering, all sweeping curves and light reactive glass designed for diplomats, not for the jagged edge of the Alara 5 sector. Kalen watched the sensor array with a growing sense of dread. 3 Vorgan swarm raiders were flanking them, their signatures like jagged teeth against the soft glow of the nebula. The Elunite crew moved with practiced pacifist grace, adjusting the decorative shields that were meant to deflect solar flares, not plasma fire. The first hit felt like a mountain falling on a greenhouse. The star chime's hull, more art than armor, shattered. Kalen reached for the long-range comms, reaching out to the High Hegemony, then the Colonial Alliance. The responses were a blur of bureaucratic indifference. One official cited hibernation protocols. Another simply dismissed the sector as a lost cause. The galaxy's most prestigious empires ignored the scream, but the monsters from the Deathworld answered. A voice, rasping and layered with the static of 1,000 solar storms, cut through the silence of the bridge. It came from a ship called the Iron Rake, a vessel that looked like it had been chewed by a black hole and spat back out. "We're about 5 minutes out," the voice said. It was Captain Miller. "Hold your breath, Sparkle ship. We're coming in hot." The Iron Rake didn't arrive through a clean warp gate. It tore into space with a violent localized rupture that sent gravitational ripples through Kalen's deck plates. It was a scarred holler held together by spite and industrial tape, and it didn't hesitate. A massive, bearded human named Mikhail stomped onto the star chime's bridge while his ship began a frantic exchange of fire with the raiders. He didn't look at the tactical display. He looked at the flickering environmental console. With a grunt, he pulled a heavy, rusted industrial wrench from his belt and slammed it against the delicate casing. Kalen winced as the crystalline components shivered, but the flickering stopped. The life support stabilized. Survival isn't a clean business, and neither is the truth. If you're ready to see what happens when the tools of a miner become the weapons of a savior, subscribe to the Chronicle. The real fight is just beginning. Mikhail wiped grease onto his flight suit and looked at the sensor ghosts of the Vorgan ships. They don't follow the rules of engagement because they grew up on a world where the rules were survive or be eaten, he muttered, more to himself than Kalen. Mikhail's gaze didn't linger on the blinking red alerts of the star chime's bridge. He was already moving toward the airlock, his heavy boots echoing like hammer strikes against the Elunite's pristine floors. The Iron Rake was groaning outside, its industrial mining lasers carving jagged, glowing scars into the lead Vorgan ship's shielding. The human Captain Miller barked through the comms, his voice a jagged edge of gravel and resolve. "We're the bait, Kalen. Tell your people to kill the lights and drift. If they can't see the glow of your crystals, they'll follow the only thing still screaming." Kalen watched, heart hammering against his ribs, as the Iron Rake intentionally cut its thrusters, tumbling toward the high-density debris field of the Alara 5 belt. It was a suicide run, a lurching metallic corpse dragging the predators into the dark. The Vorgan raiders, sensing an easy kill on the ship that had actually dared to bite back, broke formation and dove into the tumbling field of silicate and frozen ice. Then came the silence, a long, suffocating stretch where the only sound was the failing hum of the star chime's life support. Kalen gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. Suddenly the debris field ignited. Miller hadn't just flown into the rocks. He'd rigged the Iron Rake's mining charges to the largest asteroids. A sequence of rhythmic, localized explosions turned the belt into a meat grinder of tumbling stone. The Vorgan ships, built for speed and intercept, were shredded in seconds, their sleek hulls no match for the blunt force trauma of a mountain redirected by human desperation. The transition back to the airlock was a blur of static and adrenaline. The vacuum had been a death sentence, but for the three humans in those primitive suits, it was just a gap between two floors. They hadn't just launched themselves, they had calculated the trajectory of the Vorgan Raider's tumbling wreckage. As the lead Raider's hull buckled from the debris, the three boarders slammed into the breach, magnetic clamps locking with a thud that Kalen felt in his teeth. They didn't use plasma rifles. They used high-torque industrial cutters and kinetic slugs. Through the grainy security feed of the hijacked Raider, Kalen saw the humans moving with a brutal, efficient velocity. They didn't follow a deadly ballet. They moved like a landslide. Within minutes, the enemy ship's engines flared a sickly green and then died. The Iron Rake limped back toward the star chime, its hull blackened and venting atmosphere, but it was still breathing. When the ships finally docked for repairs, Mikhail returned to the bridge. He didn't ask for a medal or a formal decree of thanks. He simply walked back to the environmental console he had battered earlier. He pulled the heavy, rusted industrial wrench from his belt, the same tool that had saved their air supply, and held it out to Kalen. The metal was cold, scarred, and smelled of oil and old earth. Terra Prime didn't send a fleet because they don't have one to spare, Mikhail said, his voice quiet now. We're just the ones who couldn't sit still while a scream went unanswered. He didn't explain the history of his world, the death world that had forged such protective iron in its children. He didn't have to. Kalen looked at the wrench, then at the scarred hauler drifting outside. The empires had offered words and protocols, but the outcasts had offered their lives. As the Iron Rake detached and vanished into a jagged tear in the stars, Kalen didn't return the wrench to a toolbox. He placed it on the central pedestal of the meditation suite, where the resonance crystals usually sat. The light of Alara 5 caught the rusted iron, turning the tool of a laborer into the relic of a guardian. The galaxy is a vast, cold place, but sometimes the most dangerous things in the dark are the only ones willing to keep the lights on. Would you like to subscribe and see which empire falls next when the monsters decide to play hero? Tomorrow, we head to the Rim to find what the hegemony left behind. What would you sacrifice to save a stranger you've never met?